Hey, have you heard all the terrible rumours about these things? Like apparently they have cheap and nasty interiors, and apparently the entire driving experience is overrated because these are still just too slow.
Not to mention the endless reports of catastrophic engine failures.
But is there any truth to any of this? Like, are they really that bad? I mean, what actually goes wrong with them? Well, let's cut through the internet hype and find out once and for all if you should buy a used Subaru BR86 GRZ, because this is ReDriven and that's what we do. But we're going to start by offending the people in the comments that are going to say things like, oh, these things are just not fast enough, and 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 6.2 seconds is just too slow, and anything under 500 horsepower just isn't enough. And look, obviously this is just their arrogant or maybe delusional personalities making up for a complete lack of talent behind the wheel, because go to any track day or grassroots motorsport event and these things are very quickly becoming the go-to car. In fact, we spoke to plenty of owners that have come from far more powerful cars than these, and yet they're claiming that in terms of driving enjoyment, this is their favourite car. Not to mention, YouTube driving gods like Chris Harris and Jason Camissa have already shown us just how incredibly talented these are when you really push them hard. But look, I'm going to break our own rules here and talk about driving impressions early in the video, because I need you to understand, even at sensible speeds, like every day driving around, these things to drive are just exceptional. For me, these now have what I like to think is the perfect power to weight to torque ratio for Aussie roads. And that means that at any speed, in almost any condition, they're just so enjoyable. Nearly at any speed, but we'll get to that in a sec. And the way the steering feel matches the gear shift feel, but then it's synchronized with the pedals perfectly, and the pedal placement is so spot on for heel and towing. And they're just all an absolute joy to use. It makes roundabouts or just little corners so entertaining. And even like under the speed limit, the feeling you get through the seat of your pants, I think this thing rivals other cars costing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars more. And then because it's small, parking's easy. Driving down a tight street, another car comes the other way, you don't feel the need to breathe in. Tight driveways, no problem at all. It somehow balances being a really easy to live with everyday driver while also being completely enthralling all the time. It is so talented, although it's not perfect. The clutch pedal, that can require a bit of a steep learning curve, and there can be a bit of rev hang now and again, and that can be a bit annoying. And as I alluded to, yes, it is amazing at any speed, as long as that speed isn't freeway speed for any extended period of time, because the road and just cabin noise on the freeway can be deafening. And unsurprisingly for something wearing a Toyota or a Subaru badge, the infotainment systems are hardly class leading. There's loads of reports about Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connection issues. The Bluetooth can be a bit flaky, and the entire interface can just feel a bit old and laggy. Now, look, the good news is this is all easily upgraded. We actually highly recommend checking out the owners groups and forums for advice on this, because depending on the model you've got where you're watching this from, it can be a bit more complex. Also, we have teamed up with our mates from Automotive Superstore to make a full like in-car entertainment guide video. Highly recommend watching that before you do any of this. Actually, for all of your performance part needs like suspension components, engine parts, obviously speakers, infotainment systems, car care products, Automotive Superstore carry literally hundreds of thousands of parts. So whatever you need, chances are they'll have it. Their link is down below. Now look, while these cars might drive like they're worth thousands and thousands of dollars more, it's the interior where you suddenly start going, oh, I see where they've saved some costs. Look, I'm certainly not saying it's a cheap and nasty interior, and it is a massive step forward over the previous iteration. Personally, I think it's acceptable for a car sort of in this price bracket, but yeah, some of the materials used, a little on the cheap side. For example, like sort of some cheap plastics there and this sort of silver painted finishes, it's okay, and this is all okay, it's all okay. But unfortunately, owners have reported rattles starting to form here and there. Some of the fit and finish can be a little bit inconsistent all over the place. And apparently these interiors can just mark really easily. Actually, unfortunately, the same can be said for the exterior. Adam. Oh, sorry, I was just lost in the stunning good looks of this thing. What was I saying? That's right, exterior. It can wear easily, apparently because the paint is really thin. In fact, one owner that we spoke to is having his front bar and bonnet repainted under warranty because the stone chips and the marks have become that bad. Also, it doesn't help that the bonnet is aluminium. That's great for saving weight, but it can dent really easily. And because of all of this, plenty of owners highly recommend getting at least the front of the car PPF'd, especially if you're doing any track days or are regularly going on some, say, mountain road adventures with your mates. Speaking of track days, thanks to the car being quite light, it doesn't have much of an appetite for consumables like brakes and tyres. However, if you are doing a bunch of track days and swapping the wheels out all the time, just be careful of the wheel nuts because plenty of owners have broken these. Although that's easily fixed, just fit some aftermarket wheel nuts. Another cheap and worthwhile OEM upgrade are the wiper blades. Like so many cars, the OEM stuff is just far too expensive, but then the cheap aftermarket stuff, they're just shit. Instead, hit the WiperTech link below to get 15% off and free express shipping on the only wiper blades we use because they are simply some of the best in the business. Although, if you'd like a set of WiperTech blades for free, all you've got to do is do what Ben has done with this car and lend us your car to feature. And if we feature it, we're going to give you a set for free as a thank you present. Also, quick fun fact about Ben, he drove over 9.5 hours from Toowoomba to here in Newcastle for us to feature his car. He's standing over there. He's an absolute legend. Thanks, mate. Anyway, as far as other common exterior issues go, that's about it. Nothing else really goes wrong with the exterior. Compared to some of the used European rivals like the slightly older BMW M235i or M240i, Porsche Caymans, even Audi TTs, all of which can suffer exterior electronic gremlins, water leakage issues and bits of trim falling off, these have impressively solid build quality. Plus, it's a Toyota/Subaru, so even if something were to go wrong, the parts should be really affordable, unlike some of the Europeans. See, unfortunately, they also do feature quite a few of the same features, specifically safety features, as plenty of European cars, and that means that loads of owners complain about incessant beeps and boops and just warnings and messages going off all the time. And on models fitted with Subaru's EyeSight system, that means it has autonomous emergency braking and adaptive cruise control, that sort of stuff. Apparently the calibrations are too sensitive, so it can just jump on the anchors when it doesn't need to because there's nothing there to hit. Now, apparently some of the more recent software updates have resolved a lot of these complaints, and you can turn a lot of this stuff off. Not that we'd recommend doing that, it just means that you then have to turn it all back off again every time you start the car because it just resets. That said, there is a massive aftermarket scene for these things, not to mention the community around them is incredibly supportive and informative, and there might be some, let's say, modifications or modules that you can fit that can sort of enhance what the living experience is like with these. For example, if you want to delete the weird chiming sound that happens when the doors open but the ignition is still on, or maybe you want to add some, remote function window opening and closing via your key fob, all of this stuff can be added. Research the owners groups because doing so can make just living with the car more enjoyable. Now, on the topic of living with it, weirdly, a few people online, even journalists, have complained about how small the boot is. They know it's a sports car, yeah? I mean, complaining that this has a small boot is a bit like complaining that eating soup with a fork is far too challenging. Anyway, look, the boot space is fine. It is eaten up a little bit with this full-size spare, with the space saver or a tyre inflation kit. It's even bigger. Also, you can fit your set of track wheels and tyres and a toolkit back here when the seats are down. I know that from experience because I've seen it done countless times. Although in the back seat, I'll be honest, this is really only for the amputees or the sadomasochists amongst us. Although in saying that, at least this actually has a back seat, unlike a 370Z or an MX-5. But still, I'm exactly 11 centimeters taller than AE86 drifting legend Keiichi Tsuchiya. This is in my driving position, and yeah, it's obviously a complete joke. Like quite a few of my previous relationships, I feel trapped. However, up front, this is basically perfect for me. I'm trying to think of another car that has a better driving position for my build. If you're not my build, don't stress because there is plenty of adjustment, but just, yes. Also, the seats, they are the perfect balance between being really comfortable, but also super supportive. This texture on them as well, it kind of stops you from sliding around all over the place, but no numb bum after even hours of driving. Plus, there are just little ergonomic highlights. For example, when you're just sort of resting your hand on the shifter, it's really easy to get to the screen, or it's really easy to adjust all your HVAC controls, or pressing these buttons down here. Just smart ergonomics. A little one too, the distance from the steering wheel to the gear knob. Look at that. Perfect. And also in this area, yay for tactile buttons and knobs, and they're all... Okay, I'll be honest, they do feel a little bit cheap and nasty to use, but I just think it's great that we actually have this and not everything through a bloody touchscreen. And then as far as spaces for all of your crap, you've got a pretty decent sized glove box there. Little cubby hole under here with 2 cup holders and your auxiliary and USB inputs just there. And this one has an aftermarket cup holder that actually looks like it's a prop from Blade Runner. This is another, so it's not really a door bin, it's more of another sort of cup holder bit there. And this section here, this is designed specifically for you to keep all of your excuses for why your lap time isn't any faster. Now, even though the Subaru and the Toyota are, look, let's be honest, essentially the exact same car, the differences in features and equipment you can get can vary on the year model, the trim spec, or even where you're watching this from. See, in some regions, the BRZ is positioned as the more premium product over the GR86, unless that market also has some of the more limited edition GR86s, in which case it's the more premium model. And it will command a higher price. For example, on the Aussie used market, when new, prices range from just under $40,000 for an early base spec BRZ to nearly $55,000 for the bright yellow ultra limited TS Kiro edition. As for the GR86s, well, they sat when new roughly between $43,000 and $49,000. But on the used market, both the Subaru and the Toyota are holding their value exceptionally well. For example, about the cheapest you're going to find these days is like a base spec high kilometre 2021 BRZ. They're swapping hands for around about $35,000. So in other words, it's lost maybe $5,000 in 4.5 years. That's pretty good. But then at the other end of the spectrum, some of the more limited edition models, they can often be asking like $60,000. So that's technically more than what they cost when they were new. If they sell for that amount is a whole other story, but still bloody impressive. Not to mention, compared to plenty of their European rivals, these are way better at retaining value. But we haven't discussed the big elephant in the room yet, which is apparently anytime you turn right, the engine explodes. Well, here's a right turn, so let's see what happens. Number one, that was extremely fun. Number two, the engine does sound fine, so maybe the interwebs is lying to us. Thing is, I can't confirm or deny that because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim.
Look, the internet is lying. This is a very much overhyped problem. The early engines with the RTV blocking up the oil pickup, causing catastrophic engine failures. The reality here is less than 1% of the engines actually failed, and yes, some of the oil pickups did have some sealant sitting up against it, but just a little bit of sealant on the strainer of an oil pickup does not cause a catastrophic engine failure. Yes, it's kind of messy for a manufacturer to put excessive sealant on, and yes, that can cause a failure. But what's more likely to cause a failure is huge G's on a racetrack and poor sump design. So if you're planning on tracking one of these, just upgrade the sump and the pickup and you are extremely unlikely to have an issue. And the same can be said for all Subarus. This is not a new problem for Subarus. Yeah, look, mechanically speaking overall, these engines are actually pretty good. The oil leaking issues from the cam carriers and the heads on the 2 litres, that is not an issue on these engines so far. Let's see how they go in a few years though, but so far they're pretty good. And you know what? That's just about it for common issues on these engines. Adam and I see these at track days all the time. They are pretty much the go-to track day car now. Yeah, they are affordable and bloody reliable. The transmissions and drive lines in these are pretty good. If they're serviced as a daily driver, you're not likely to have any issues. The automatics, now some owners that got the automatics just dislike very much the ratios, and we know of a few cases where owners have traded up to a manual transmission and loved it straight after that. So look, just skip the whole auto thing, go straight for the manual. If you can't drive a manual, it's a great car to learn how to drive a manual in. But one more thing, this is another car where the manufacturers are stretching out these service intervals. The recommendations here are every 15,000 kilometres. Look, if you're going to keep it for a while, I would recommend doing it every 10,000 kilometres. If you are tracking it or leaning on it, do it every 5,000 kilometres. Now, I should also add, this is not just some greedy capitalist mechanic trying to take your money. This is thinking about the long-term prospects of the car. You might want to keep it for a while, You might not want to go on a track day, but think about the second or third owners of these that might actually want to go and put it on a track. Look after your motoring enthusiasts, future friends.
But we still need to answer the big question, should you buy one of these? You're kidding, right? Yeah, of course you should. And look, obviously an MX-5 is extremely tempting, and fair enough, as is a Nissan 370Z. But even if you're in the market for cars much higher up the food chain, like a more recent Porsche 718, or even 911, or maybe a Jaguar F-Type, or maybe something wearing an M or an AMG badge, we argue this is the smarter buy. Obviously, all the premium European stuff comes with a truckload of vibe and brand appeal that the humble Toyo Baru can't match. But what's the higher priority for you? Driving enjoyment or image? And obviously the BR86 GRZ isn't perfect or impervious to abuse. Only buy an example with a faultless service history and make sure you have a full pre-purchase inspection carried out before you hand over your hard-earned. But find a pristine example like Ben's here and snap it up, because it is a truly, truly brilliant car. Although, there is another car for this kind of money that's more practical, it's arguably just as reliable, and we think it might be one of the most slept-on performance cars money can buy. It's this. Seriously, you gotta check that out. Now, even though the Toyota and the Subaru are and answer all of those questions once and for all and find out, well, let's cut through it's motorsport event or track day. Sorry.